we will continue discussing transatlantic trade and investment partnership. And I think the first panel gave us a very good general introduction on EU and US SME policy frameworks. Right now we are going to debate for a little bit more than 1 hour transatlantic trade and investment partnership and the opportunities it offers for small and medium-sized enterprises. These negotiations has been started 1 year ago, and very often in the EU jargon we call them deep and comprehensive. And what do we mean by deep and comprehensive in this context? They are supposed to cover a large number of diverse areas. Not only they are about typical in this kind of agreements, market access issues. The negotiations have also a robust component on regulatory cooperation, and they do also have a number of other issues that were put by both sides to the negotiating tables. Discussions on global trade rules, discussions on sustainable development, energy, access to raw materials. Speakers in the previous panel referred to the immense scale of transatlantic economic cooperation. I will not be repeating further proofs on that. There is no need for doing that. What's important to say that these negotiations and this agreement offers unprecedented opportunity for the small and middle-sized enterprises, which are always disproportionately affected by trade barriers, disproportionately affected by regulatory incompatibilities, disproportionately affected by lengthy administrative behind-the-border procedures. And that was the major objective where both negotiating team came up with a proposal. Why not to have a separate, dedicated SME chapter in the context of the negotiations, which is a complete novelty, at least as far as the European Union Free Trade Agreement is concerned. I'm not sure how it is on the US side. Maybe colleagues has already negotiated something like that. And the main objective of this panel is actually to tell you about the content of the future chapter on SMEs, but also to find out about your expectations. What elements you believe a chapter like that should include to be truly meaningful? What provisions it should have to ensure that SMEs' interests are taken into consideration across all negotiating chapters, and then solutions developed in the process of negotiations are reflected well in the final text of the agreement. And we have invited a number of distinguished speakers who are involved directly or indirectly in the process of negotiations. So we have the core EU and US negotiating teams. We have an important voice of EU and US business associations. And we will also hear a testimony from an individual entrepreneur who is involved in doing business on both markets. And she's got the first-hand knowledge what barriers we are facing and suggestions to the negotiators how to resolve them. I have not asked them before, but let me risk the following thesis. They have at least one point in common. They are in favor of a strong SME chapter. I think we have more or less 1 hour for a debate. I will be quite strict with the timing, so we can allow a proper discussion and questions from your side. And without further ado, I suggest we first listen to the voice of US and EU negotiators. And I would like to invite Christina Sevilla, who is the lead negotiator on the SME chapter on the US side, representing today the Office of the US Trade Representative. Thank you.
Thank you to the European Commission, Italian presidency for having me here today, and Mr. Calleja. It's been a fantastic conference, and the opportunity to meet with SME associations from across Europe has been incredibly important. This is an opportune time to discuss the significance of the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership for small and medium-sized enterprises on both sides. You know, we've said that there are 28 million SMEs in the US, 20 million in the EU. These SMEs, which actually export and engage in international trade, they grow faster, they add jobs faster, they pay higher wages than small businesses that serve purely domestic markets. But we know we can do much better for our small businesses. It's actually quite a small percentage of SMEs that export from the United States, as few as 1 in 100, whereas the EU side is actually much more engaged in international trade. Our SMEs, about 1 in 8 export outside the EU. So what we want to do is to, through the TTIP, to reduce the trade barriers that can disproportionately burden small business relative to the larger multinationals, that they're actually more costly to small business. And we want to unlock huge opportunities for economic growth and jobs that remain on both sides of the border for our innovative and competitive small and medium enterprises across sectors. We want to connect small businesses from Naples to New York, from Marseille to Minneapolis, from San Francisco to Stockholm, with business partnerships and opportunities and greater market access for potential 800 million customers. A lot of the discussions here have focused on where will your next customer come from, and the United States and the EU together form a huge market. As President Obama has said, this trade and investment partnership that we're pursuing between the US and EU will build on the millions of jobs on both sides of the Atlantic already supported by US and EU trade, especially for small and medium businesses. Here in Italy, Prime Minister Renzi took to Twitter to express his support for TTIP and saying Italy is committed to advancing quickly because there are huge opportunities to achieve. Already, our trade relationship of $1 trillion in two-way trade, $4 trillion in two-way foreign direct investment supports about 13 million jobs. This is more than a statistic. It means an office or a plant or a startup space in towns and cities all across the US and EU. It means stability and economic security, and it means new jobs. But we know we can do better. I think as Mr. Calleja said, the US and EU currently account for 1/3 of global trade. Actually, 15 years ago, the US and EU accounted for half of world trade. So now is the time together for us to act as exercise transatlantic leadership, to set global trade rules that are consistent with our shared values, like the rule of law, strong labor standards, and enforceable and environmental and labor protections. As the ambassador said, we strongly believe that international trade is not just for the big companies and the hundreds of thousands of workers they employ. For example, the joining together of Fiat and Chrysler, two great made in Italy and made in America brands. They employ thousands of SMEs in the auto sector throughout their supply chain. Just to take the auto sector as an example, as the largest manufacturing and exporting sector in the US and EU, both automakers and the auto suppliers, which are majority SMEs, have a great stake in the conclusion of an ambitious trade agreement. I've met with many of these auto suppliers, small auto suppliers throughout the EU, like Foya Powertrain outside of Leipzig, making parts for engines that are sold in the United States, and they're opening an office in Alabama, or like Fertinger, making air conditioning parts in Wockersdorf, Austria, again, sold to US customers and opening an office in the United States. These factories have workers whose livelihoods are dependent on transatlantic supply chains, and we want to strengthen this through the TTIP. The US and EU together represent the largest share of auto production and sales that will ever be covered by have ever been covered by a free trade agreement. And even just eliminating the auto sector tariffs would reduce more than $2 billion in annual costs. In addition to these SMEs participating in supply chains, there are hundreds of thousands that are selling directly across the Atlantic, like Afesa, a Belgian company whose industrial cameras are in Texas oil wells, or like Zortrax. It's a 3D printer company from Poland, which started its funding in 2009 on Kickstarter, the US site, and just this year they made a sale of 5,000 3D printers to Dell Company. On the US side, Perkins Products, it's a small company in Watertown, Massachusetts, making assistive products for the blind, sold $800,000 to EU countries last year. But for all of these success stories, there are many, hundreds of thousands of more firms on both sides of the Atlantic where the trade barriers remain too costly and too high. And that is what we're trying to address through the TTIP across all of the chapters of the agreement, to particularly address those trade burdens which are disproportionately costly to SMEs. And in order to gather input for this purpose on the United States side, we've conducted with our U.S. International Trade Commission, our Small Business Administration, our Department of Commerce, roundtables across the United States in 28 cities, meeting directly with small business owners about the types of barriers they face, specific barriers like the kind the Italian representative mentioned, in industries ranging from medical devices to cosmetics to electronics to emerging technologies to sporting goods to you name it. We've held public hearings specifically for small business in the United States, and we commissioned our independent International Trade Commission to issue a report, which is public online, detailing exactly the types of barriers that small businesses perceive as disproportionately costly to them relative to large companies that we could usefully address through the TTIP. And these are being addressed throughout the chapters of the agreement. The small and medium enterprise chapter is intended to leverage this information to help small businesses understand the benefits that they can achieve throughout the market access chapters of the agreement, and to provide them with the information tools they need to take advantage of the agreement, as well as deepen cooperation between the United States and EU. And as the Italian representative had asked, provide a permanent platform for discussion between US and EU small businesses about how the agreement is working, where it can be improved, to get feedback, and to importantly deepen the type of cooperation measures between the US and EU on small and medium enterprises, ranging from clusters to SME finance to startups, crowdfunding, entrepreneurship, young entrepreneurship, deepening all of these elements of cooperation. As we mentioned, the TTIP will reduce costs and barriers for small business, whether it's eliminating tariffs at the border that are charged by governments. TTIP envisions complete elimination of tariffs. The German SME auto supplier I met with said he pays 700,000 euro in tariffs alone, just selling the parts to the United States with a 4 to 5% tariff average. Reducing wait times at the border, reducing duplicative paperwork, speeding release of goods. If you're an SME and you have to wait 4 days, 5 days, 6 days for your goods to be released, that's a cost of warehousing. What if we could automate those processes, unify the types of information between EU and US customs authorities so you only had to hit send once and your goods could be released in hours instead of days? That's a huge cost savings to a small and medium-sized business. Reaffirming intellectual property rights protection, which is critical for small businesses and all of our innovative industries that we've been hearing about over the last 2 days here. US and EU SMEs can be especially vulnerable to infringement of their IPR. Increasing the information that's available for small businesses online, in an easy place to find, so that you can know about the foreign regulations that may affect your imports, about customs procedures, for example, import procedures in both partners. Fostering electronic commerce is a huge opportunity for SMEs, which has just been touched here. I noticed that so many of the enterprise awards last night that were granted to European SMEs were in the e-commerce and digital products type of sector. This is a massive new opportunity which has just arisen in recent years for SMEs, and that's why we're also thinking about the needs of SMEs in our e-commerce chapter as well. we need to keep the internet open and duty-free and not have governments start beginning to charge duties on transmissions of music, movies, software, video games. I met with a video game developer in Poland, Artifex Mundi, which started with 7 graduates in computer science from Silesian Polytechnic. They started working for a Seattle firm in developing graphics and design. Then they started launching their own games. They now have 110 employees of engineers, software, graphics, 2 and 3D design, and 40% of their sales are in the United States. So keeping online commerce duty-free, allowing businesses to locate their servers in any location that they wish, certainties that governments may not arbitrarily block your website. These are the types of guarantees that we can secure through TTIP that are essential to this burgeoning industry, which is going to employ so many of the youth of the future for the US and the EU. Just last year alone, there were $988 billion in sales between North America and Europe in e-commerce. So these are vast new opportunities. If you look at the platform eBay, for example, mostly small businesses sell offline. 1 in 100 small businesses in the US export. Online, a small business sells to between 24 and 35 foreign markets. The Etsy platform is another platform for handicrafts for small business. 80% of the sellers on here are women businesses, women-owned businesses with 1 and 2 employees selling around the world.
Christina, excuse me.
I'm already going over time.
I am famous for being the most strictest moderator in Napoli.
Thank you. Increasing regulatory compatibility and standards for small business, hugely important both across sectors for the exact type of reasons that the Italian gentleman mentioned, as well as something we're calling horizontal transparency, ensuring small businesses have the opportunity, both the US and foreign, EU and US, comment and on new regulations as they're developed that might impact their business. As EU leaders have noted and US leaders have noted, this is a once-in-a-lifetime or once-in-a-generation opportunity for the United States and the EU to build an economic alliance that is commensurate with our security alliance. So the economic and strategic imperative has never been greater, and in terms of the benefits yet to be unlocked for hundreds of thousands, millions of US and EU small businesses on both sides of the border, we must seize this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm sure there will be further opportunities during the question and answer sessions. In my own language, we have a saying, you need 2 to a tango. And therefore, I would like to invite Ms. Signe Razzo, who is the EU lead negotiator and actually a director in the European Commission responsible for the trade strategy analysis as well as market access issues. And therefore, I'm sure she has a very horizontal overview on all negotiating process.
Okay, thanks a lot. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to attend the conference here and to have the opportunity to speak about the benefits that TTIP can bring for SMEs. Well, actually, just a small correction. The negotiator of the SME chapter is a member of my team, but I have an oversight of several chapters, including that one. Now, a lot has already been said. So what I'd like to do during my short intervention is just to give you some examples, including some very practical examples, to show how SMEs could benefit from the TTIP, and then say a few words about the SME chapter, what is actually envisaged in the SME chapter. But starting once again to underline that certainly it's not only the SME chapter which would be the benefit, which will bring the benefits for the SMEs. But it's actually across different chapters, whether it's goods, services, intellectual property rights, or public procurement, will bring additional benefits for the SMEs as already mentioned, that they are actually disproportionately hit by different barriers, and actually they will also disproportionately benefit if those barriers are removed. First of all, even if we know that the tariffs in the transatlantic marketplace are already low, 4% on an average, if we look at some specific sectors which are also of interest for SMEs, say clothing or footwear, of importance also Italian manufacturers, there you can actually find some tariff peaks with tariffs of 20% and even more. And certainly if you are part of the global value chain, if you also have to import in order to be able to export, certainly the tariffs matter in bringing additional cost to you. So duties still matter, tariffs still matter. Nevertheless, as we've seen that the bulk of the benefits will actually come from the elimination of non-tariff barriers, behind the border barriers. Already a few examples were given from the pharmaceutical sector. And really, as I actually came here from the European Health Forum, where we had all representatives from the different parts of the health sector, and certainly they wanted to hear what will be the benefits for their sector. Indeed, if you take the pharmaceutical products, then one can ask, why should you trust less the inspectors who come over from the US than those who come over from the UK to Sweden, for instance? As in the EU, we have the peer review system, namely the member states put trust into the other member state inspectors in order to eliminate this kind of double inspections. And in order to build this trust, it's not only the trade negotiators who are negotiating this agreement, but it's also the regulators who are around the table, as these are the regulators who have to build trust in each other in order to be really able to trust and then eliminate then the double testing, which is not only for the pharmaceutical products, but also, for instance, for the car products. And certainly car sector is one of those who will get most of the benefits as the removal of the barriers. Now, take another sector. Well, certainly, well, everybody knows that those who are manufacturing agriculture and food products know about the adverse effects of the Russian bans on certain sectors, on the fruit sector, on the dairy and meat sector, for instance. But if you'd like to export your dairy products to the US, today you have a very complicated approval program for dairy products. So it's not that easy to do so. In addition, there are also high tariff peaks in some of those sectors. So certainly the TTIP would give also alternative markets for those sectors. Now, before coming to the SME sector specifically, just let me mention only a couple of figures, as we've already heard quite a few of them. Namely, the latest Eurostat statistics show that in the EU we have some 600,000 SMEs who are currently exporting, which is more than 80% of all exporting companies, and they account for roughly 500 billion euros, which is a third of total EU exports. So certainly this is a significant part, and that's why there is also specific attention to this sector in these negotiations. As Director General Calleja already mentioned, this is the first agreement for the EU where we are going to have a specific SME chapter. And what will then be the structure and the benefit of this specific chapter? First of all, strengthening of cooperation. It was already described that there is currently already cooperation between the US Department of Commerce, European Commission, DG Enterprise, and now we can build on the current cooperation, which has already existed for quite some years. Then the second part is information sharing. Certainly, if you are an SME and you really would like to know what are the specific benefits of this agreement for you, or if you are interested what are the export regimes for specific products, what are the tariffs, what are the different regulations that namely concern your specific product, you should be able to do so. And that's why the information sharing is also something which we specifically look upon in these negotiations. Namely, each side would develop web-based information and also other resources to help SMEs first to understand the provisions of the agreement and also how they can benefit from it. But what we also, in addition, promote in these negotiations is that we could have also on the US side something which would mirror the database that we have in Europe, which is Export Help Desk, which actually provides information for all importers who would like to export to the European market, namely whether they come from the US, whether they come from the developing countries, or whether they are the SMEs who are European companies who just import in order to be able to export. As a result, it would be possible really to find very exact information on that. Just on this, I'd like to conclude with a concrete example, which is actually an example on the market access database, which is the EU system providing information about the export possibilities. I was, a week ago, I was in Estonia, and I met the Estonian Minister for Trade, who is now really also trying to help companies in order to find alternative markets, specifically for dairy companies who've lost their market in Russia. And they were looking for Japan, but it was very complicated to find which ministry to contact, what are the rules of the game there. And then I said, but okay, but we have this market access database. They checked. And then she opened on her iPad, putting there the cheese and curds, and then she had all the information there, up to the telephone numbers of those who need to be contacted. This would be, so to say, ideal situation if we could have something also similar with the US, not only at the federal but also at the state level, as we heard that there are also differences at the state level. Just to conclude, one word about the transparency. As this week the negotiators had the 7th round of negotiations, and in the SME chapter, we hope that very soon we will be able already to send a consolidated text of this chapter to the EU member states and the European Parliament. This is, I think, the best example of transparency, that actually this is the intention not only in this area of negotiations, but in all chapters, that once we have a consolidated text, then this can be also shared with the others. Thanks a lot for your kind attention.
Thank you very much. Next to DG Trade and the USTR office, DG Enterprise, we also have the 4th player in the negotiations, which is the Department of Commerce. And I would like to invite Laurie Cooper from the Department of Commerce International Trade Administration. Laurie, if within 3 minutes you could complement and add all key elements that has not been highlighted so far.
I've been given some very strict time limits. and I'm happy to accommodate my colleague from DG Enterprise. So I'm going to go through really quickly here. First, I want to say good morning. Second, I'd like to say thank you to the organizers for inviting me to participate. So we've talked about the fact that we have TTIP negotiations that are currently underway. But what are the U.S. and the EU doing right now to support SMEs? I wanted to say just a few very fast words, and I've got my eye on the clock, we actually have a collaboration going on between the Department of Commerce and DG Enterprise. In 2012, Department of Commerce and DG Enterprise negotiated an MOU to support our SMEs that operate in the transatlantic market. The MOU brings together DG Enterprise's Enterprise Europe network with Department of Commerce's commercial service offices in Europe at our embassies, and also our commercial service offices in cities across the United States. So under the MOU, we carry out a number of activities jointly. We share resources at trade shows. We do joint networking opportunities for SMEs. We do joint site visits. We sponsor, we promote business partnering opportunities for our SMEs. We also work to share information on specific resources between US and EU. For example, SME-related resources and contact points. And we also host best practice exchange events. So starting in 2012, we have collaborated at several trade shows, and I'll give you just a few examples. This is not the full universe, but we had collaboration at Hanover Fair, at Medica, and we also had collaboration at the Bio Congress that was held in Chicago last year and in San Diego this year. So coming up this week, another good example is at the WaveEC, which is a wave energy trade show in Lisbon. U.S. Department of Commerce and Enterprise Europe Network in Portugal are collaborating closely there on a B2B matchmaking and also on a best practices exchange. So moving right along, giving an example of the one-day best practice exchanges that we have also held under our MOU. In Athens in 2014, we had a one-day exchange involving EEN in Athens and Commission, European Commission, U.S. Department of Commerce, USTR participated, and we covered 4 topics at that one-day exchange: access to finance, e-governance, entrepreneurship, and TTIP and SMEs. These are examples of the type of programs that can be done in the future. I wanted to throw these out so people in the audience could think about how we could do more of these. So how and why is this important for TTIP? First, these activities will provide much of the foundation for the cooperation that will take place under TTIP. So this means that the MOU activities are a practical way for SMEs to be involved in building toward a TTIP that meets SME needs and concerns. So in closing and looking ahead, what I wanted to do was acknowledge the team in Department of Commerce and in DG Enterprise members who are here. I wanted to acknowledge, I think Patricia Gonzalez is still out in the audience. She is our Deputy Senior Commercial Officer at the U.S. Mission to the EU in Brussels, who has been very instrumental in implementing this MOU. And then our esteemed moderator, Wojciech Sopinski, who has also been active in this since the very beginning. We've all worked together with a host of other colleagues to implement the MOU, and we all hope that you will become involved in our MOU programs going forward. We welcome your suggestions, we welcome your participation, and we look forward to working with you in the coming months under the MOU to support our SMEs, but also to build toward a TTIP agreement that strongly supports SMEs on both sides of the Atlantic. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. These were official positions of the governments, but governments have to be very attentive to voice of businesses and those who represent them business associations. And I would like to invite now the representative of a very powerful EU business association, Mr. Arnaldo Abruzzini, who is the Secretary General of the Eurochambres. And his organization represents nearly 2,000 local and regional chambers of commerce across the European Union, with more than 20 million enterprises who are members.
I have to choose between two different speeches to deliver, and I would like to ask your help to decide which of the two speeches I will deliver. And I would like you to express yourself if you are pro TTIP or you are against. Now, those that are pro, can you raise your hand, please? Thank you very much. Those that are against, don't be shamed. I mean, no one will shame you, don't worry. Who are against? Raise your hand. Okay. I take this pitch, which lasts 1 minute. We don't need to convince anyone here. Everyone agrees that we should go ahead, and TTIP is a good exercise that will bring benefit, those benefits that has been highlighted, to all our businesses and specifically to the small business. Why we are here? We should invite those that are against. This is where the debate will become interesting. We should tell people the stories they want to hear. We should demystify what people have in mind when they say we are against. In the past number of days, I have participated in several different TV or radio interviews on TTIP. And it was quite awkward, but very interesting, that I was considered to be one of those pro, like you are, and I was confronted with someone that was against. Now, you know what? None of them has ever raised a single time all those benefits that we were listening during this and the previous panel. Those are not the concerns that make people saying, I'm against. Now, I have here a little list of things that I've been asked during these interviews. Shall we get on our dishes chlorine-washed poultry? Shall we get on our dishes GMO food? Shall we get systems that will track us everywhere in the world? Shall we be exposed to an inexistent personal data protection? Isn't it this only for large corporations? And the one that I've repeated many times, but we don't know what is in it, so why we're doing all this? Now, unless we are able to find answers that would be convincing to the myths that people has in mind when talking about this exercise, TTIP, we will never be able to gain support for what we are doing. Now, I'm glad to report that none of this request has a positive answer. The answer is always no, no, no. Why? Because all this is out of scope of TTIP. None of these things will be negotiated by the negotiator. Is that right? Or will you negotiate these things? None of these things are in the scope of the mandate. The negotiator will not have the power, should they be willing to overcome policy and political decisions that have been taken already, in this case by the EU. This is not the case. the case is different. Now, I think that many of you have played, maybe not in recent years, to Risico. You know that game that you have the map of the world, you had to conquer the world? Now, why I'm referring to this? Because TTIP, besides, and I do not want to underestimate all the benefit that could come to the business community and the SMEs that I mostly represent in Europe, but there is also an extraordinary opportunity today, which is the two largest trading blocs in the world, the two most integrated business community in the world, have a chance to set the standards for the rest of the world. It has been mentioned, EU-US some years ago counted for half of the global trade. Now we are 1/3. In the coming year, that figure will go down and down, but not because we are getting worse, because the rest of the globe is coming up. And because we know how much important standards, regulations are for the businesses, should we agree, both of us, in joint approach to that specific point, which is the regulatory approach, therefore we will have the chance that those standards will be taken up by the rest of the globe. And therefore we have the chance that our businesses, not only EU business in the US or US business in the EU, but our joint efforts will leave us a possibility and a chance to increase our trade in the rest of the world. That is what is behind this exercise, not chlorine-washed poultry or GMO meat or transgenic whatever or data protection. This is not the scope. The exercise is different, and this is why, as Eurochambres, we pursue the importance of the negotiation, provided that the SME chapters that these two charming ladies represent is the focus of the negotiations, because that is where the most of the gain can come. Thank you.
Thank you very much for putting pressure on negotiators. It's always very, very important. And I think you highlighted very well actually, concerns, worries that exist in Europe and the mismatch between the content of the negotiations and the public perception. And I very much wonder whether a similar perception or worries, concerns exist on the US side, and that's why I would like to invite Mr. Brooke Fishback, who represents the US Chamber of Commerce, and at the same time he is a Director of International Sales for Health Enterprises, a global company present actually on both the US and the European Union market.
This is all true. Buongiorno, thank you all for coming today. Like he said, my name is Brooke Fishback. I'm the Director of International Sales for Health Enterprises. We're a leading global supplier of niche consumer health products. I'll be speaking today on behalf of my company as well as the U.S. Chamber of Commerce in Washington, D.C., who, as you probably know, is the world's largest business federation representing the interests of more than 3 million businesses. In the effort of time, I'm going to whittle this presentation down to 2 key points that I want to address, but I'm happy to email you the entire presentation if you like, because you may find some interesting studies and also some good points to highlight some of the benefits of the agreement. The 2 things that I want to focus on are, 1, removing non-tariff trade barriers, and 2, focusing on export promotion. With regards to non-tariff trade barriers, the main point that I always like to make is Americans and Europeans have a similar idea of what is considered safe. In the US and the Europeans, we have the same concept. So we need to have a mutual recognition of regulations and testing methodologies so as to reduce costs while still maintaining robust safety standards. So the key element again, I want to write this down, we will still have robust safety standards because we have the same idea of what is considered to be safe. And so I think we can find some opportunities for regulatory cohesion, and specific to our company, I would like to see that in Class 1 medical devices, non-sterile, non-measuring. The simplest classification of medical devices. Because a concrete example for you all is that we sell finger splints, simple products made out of aluminum and foam. But to sell these products in the European Union, we need to register them with the local Ministry of Health, which costs thousands of dollars for the registration fees, and the stacks of paperwork that we have to complete require many, many man-hours. So we're talking about a simple finger splint here, something already registered with the FDA. We're looking for some type of regulatory compatibility cohesion so that we don't have to re-register, and I'm sure European companies feel the same way. The second element is trade negotiations help to reduce tariff barriers and non-tariff barriers, but what they do not do is facilitate matchmaking between companies in different countries. The key element to this is to make more opportunities for that matchmaking. One element is providing direct funding to companies that have the ability to matchmake. I'd like to mention the Small Business Administration STEP grant program in the United States. I'd like to see that reauthorized because it provides direct funding to small U.S. businesses to increase their exports. It's a great program. The other element is many companies do not export because they simply do not know how to export. They don't know how to get their product from country A to country B. They don't know how to find partners in foreign countries. And so we need to make sure that we have programs in place and funding available to ensure that they get this education. Specific to the United States, I would like to see additional funding for the U.S. Small Business Administration's SBDCs, like our Mass Export Center in Massachusetts, to ensure that they have the funding available to educate small businesses in how to export. Because if they don't know how to export, then they simply will not export, or they will try and fail. The second element is we need to ensure that, specific to the U.S., we need to ensure that the commercial service is properly funded so that our boots on the ground in foreign countries have the monies available that they require in order to help our companies find foreign partners in different countries, because that's one of the services that they do. But to that end, we don't need to wait for the TTIP in order to already improve on this matchmaking. Already the U.S. Commercial Service, and I understand there's some additional talks underway, the U.S. Commercial Service and Enterprise Europe can already start talking amongst themselves in terms of additional ways to bring U.S. companies and European companies together so that we can find partners to be able to actually sell our products in each other's markets. Back to the TTIP. I do just want to say that our company, Health Enterprises, along with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, are strong proponents of the TTIP. We believe that it will be beneficial not only for American companies, but also for European companies. It will add additional jobs, it will increase GDP, it will increase earnings per household, and we hope that we can continue the negotiations and bring this to fruition. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much for this very clear position of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, which indeed I can say regulatory cohesion, regulatory compatibility, these are keys and they are on the table, but there are so many awkward procedures that the negotiations are ongoing, and I'm sure the discussion will lead to something constructive and successful, but indeed it will take time. I would like to now invite Elena Stegemann, who is the example of represents a successful company, NuStep, present on both the US and in some markets of the European Union. And I think she will have a very first-hand knowledge of barriers that any company is facing on the transatlantic market. And potentially she might have some hints to the negotiators what issues should be addressed in the context of negotiations, or she could propose ready solutions which could be incorporated in the final agreement. Please, Elena.
Thank you, Wojciech. That's a lot of expectations. Let's see if I can live up to that. Well, thank you for the opportunity to be here. It's definitely a pleasure, and I believe very important for everyone here to hear from us SMEs, companies that are doing the actual exporting, that are sitting on airplanes and eating the free peanuts and living the life of an exporter. As Wojciech said, I represent a small company based in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Has anyone ever heard of Michigan here? Oh, wow, I'm impressed. It's just like Naples. We have palm trees and sunshine. It's exactly the same, right? No. Anyway, Ann Arbor is a small town very close to Detroit, Michigan. And we're beneficiaries of a great culture of manufacturing, what we call the old-fashioned way. You probably know that a lot of cars are made in Detroit. So in Ann Arbor, we have a lot of people who are very capable and experienced in making really good, high-quality products. And we're very proud of the equipment that we make. We make exercise machines that are specialized for people who have some kind of a medical problem or a physical limitation that prevents them from being able to exercise. So somebody who maybe is paralyzed after a stroke or a traumatic brain injury, our equipment is designed with the help of doctors and physiotherapists and is customized in a way that allows a person like that to have much better quality of life, to move. Sometimes I see people who have never moved their legs before who sit down on one of our machines, and because of the special adaptive devices on it, they see their legs move for the first time. So our motto is we transform lives. And of course, it's a great privilege and opportunity for us to be able to export these products throughout the world. We have a presence in about 25 countries now. We started exporting a little over 5 years ago, primarily in response to the downturn in the US economy. So it's a very common theme. You probably heard that small companies are, especially in the US, are inexperienced with exporting, are shy. But this economic crisis was a real push for a lot of companies, including ours, to go find customers overseas. So at this point in time, like I said, we're in about 25 countries. Our #1 export market is Asia. Actually, we ship containers full of our machines to Japan and China. Our #2 export market is Canada. And #3 export market, so at the bottom of the list, is Europe. So this is not because we don't put a high priority on our exporting activities to Europe. In fact, our leadership of the company really saw things very differently when we first started exporting. The goal was to penetrate the European market as much as possible because doing some demographic studies, market research analysis, we saw great potential for our products in the European market. However, finding customers in the European market has been a little bit challenging. The customers are there, and we know it, but getting our product ready for exporting to Europe has been complicated for us. There are about 100 people in our company now. We've seen a lot of growth. We started with 50 when I came there 5 years ago. Only 2 of the 100 people in our company are dedicated to export 100%. So it's myself and one other person who does a lot of the internal and the logistics work. So when we started looking at the requirements for our product, which is considered to be a medical device in Europe, we quickly realized, as one of my colleagues here alluded to, it's quite an undertaking for a small company to meet CE mark medical device regulatory compliance requirements. With 2 people dedicated 100% to international business, we simply don't have the resources in-house to be worrying about compliance, all the elements. And frankly, our budget is very tight. So it was a very difficult sell for me internally to the leadership of our company to say that we haven't sold anything to Europe yet, not a single machine, yet we should go ahead and invest $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 because we need to go hire an external consultant to have our product meet CE mark requirements. So when we talk about TTIP, I get really excited because this means that our governments, instead of myself, the few people that we have in our company that think about international business, our governments are going to sit down and talk about regulatory compliance, and they're going to find a way to make both the US and European sides come to some kind of a conclusion and agreement, a way that will take some of the burden off of us and it'll make it easier for us to continue innovating, generating new products, responding to the customer feedback that we have been receiving from our European customers, saying that, you know, we see an opportunity for you to increase sales tenfold if you were to add this additional feature to your product. Well, if we were to do that, then we would become a Class 2 or a Class 3 medical device. And I've already mentioned how complicated this is for us to deal with internally. So we've, as a company, we've been around for 30 years in the US. We've proven ourselves to be sophisticated, high quality, very focused on delivering a safe product, you know, because of the patients that we work with. We've already spent and dedicated a lot of resources to bringing this kind of a product to market that meets requirements in the US. We really call upon the negotiators to think about a process that makes it easier for a company like us to take our product the way it is and enter the European market with not as many regulatory hurdles as what we've had to encounter. You know, there are many other benefits to TTIP. Anything that you know, our governments can do for us, a small company like us, is huge. Several people have already alluded to the fact that SMEs are disproportionately affected by all of the barriers, tariff and non-tariff. Tariff is another area for us that we're really excited about. Yes, percentage-wise, it's a small number. You know, our distributors pay 3% on the value of our goods, but when you talk about shipping containers to Europe, each container is worth at least $100,000. So that 3% becomes very meaningful. And when we succeed, by we I mean NuStep and other SMEs in the US, succeed in selling more product, you have to think about the fact that many of us SMEs are business-to-business companies. So when I sell a container to Germany, there is a small German company that is able to buy my product for now less money, and they're able to be more successful, sell more NuSteps, and grow their business too. When we are able to be more innovative with our product, because maybe the regulatory environment is more encouraging, they are able to bring better products to Germany, to wherever they happen to be in Europe. So I really feel that the TTIP, even though I'm representing a US company, because I work so closely with our European distributors, I want to see them succeed too, and it's really a platform for successful SMEs on both sides of the Atlantic. Thank you.
I think, Elena, you touched one more time, touch upon a very important issue of regulatory coherence, creating regulatory synergy, something that indeed is being discussed, how to simplify the placement of each other's products on the respective markets. I will open now the floor for questions, and please don't be shy, ask them. That's really an opportunity to have together business associations together with negotiators. So it's unprecedented session for the first time after 7 rounds. I just know that Signorazzo would like to comment on Elena's intervention, and then I would welcome questions from the floor. You would like to comment, Signe?
Yeah, I can make use of the time when the participants will find the questions, and also provide a couple of comments on the points made mainly on the medical devices. This was one of the examples which actually two of the last presenters gave. Certainly, the regulations differ from different sectors, and I'd also first like to encourage those whose sectors were not particularly commented, first to also check first the EU positions, and also the issues that the negotiators are touching upon. as part of these negotiations per sectors. And this kind of information is readily available for each of you on the website of DigiTrade of the European Commission. So then you can also find some specific examples there. But just to take the medical devices, which is actually also part of one of those sectors on which there are also specific negotiations ongoing. And it is one of these sectors where really the authorization procedures are different on both sides of the Atlantic. However, what could be done is certainly first to streamline these procedures, so that it will be less burdensome for the companies, specifically if it comes to the SMEs. But actually, as you've heard, that SMEs actually can manufacture actually very expensive equipment, as medical devices are normally very expensive. For instance, these include the collection of data, as now there are also different requirements for types of data the manufacturers need to submit. And one of these objectives is just to harmonize the data sets. So even if there are still two authorities for which you have to provide your data, but if it's if it's basically the same data, then certainly it's much less costly for the companies. Then another issue which is being negotiated is whether to provide a unique identification for the medical equipment. In order to make it possible also to provide recalls. If something happens, if you have to recall, it's like to recall a car from the market, also to recall the medical equipment, so that they have the single identification number. Just to give some examples from this medical equipment part, but certainly.
Would you have any additional questions, comments? Please do so. Please.
Hello, my name is Antoine Bertrand. I'm working for the Walloon region, which is in Belgium. I would like to thank all the panelists. I've heard all the argument in favor of TTIP, as the standardization, all the trade barrier, and so on. But I would like to know if a study has been published to evaluate this gain, especially for the SMEs, in terms of value added and employment. Thank you.
Will there be any more questions? Maybe we could collect a set of questions and then we answer them jointly.
My name is Ralf Klinkenberg. I'm one of the founders of RapidMiner. We are founded in Germany and now also have an office in the US. We doubled the number of employees, 50% in Europe, 50% in the US. So we work on both sides. And there's two minor things that I came across. One is the ease of travel. I really love in the European Union that you can cross borders so quickly. You just drive with your car, you don't even have to stop. Whenever I enter the US, I have to stay 1 hour, 1.5 hours in line. Well, there's a quick entry program, but it's only applicable to US citizens. Is there any plan to, well, have something similar in place, a quick entry program? I understand there needs to be security checks, but, well, I have no problem with giving information that's needed, but I have a problem with waiting and wasting time. The other thing is related to becoming a vendor for US government institutions. We do a lot of business in the US, including US government, but we're not a vendor to them. We always have to go through a third party. Although we already have a US office, but it's too young. We still have to wait a few years. So that would be a great improvement for us. I know it's not as much as a problem as in the healthcare sector. That's much more severe. But, well, for our business, it's quite an issue. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Any more questions? I think this is not the case. I suggest then that we will have answers both from the US colleagues and NGO side. And let's give the voice to the US colleagues first, as they came such a long way without queuing in the airport. That I think they could start. Please, Christina.
Just regarding the studies we have done on potential benefits for the TTIP, it's really the U.S. International Trade Commission study on that small businesses own self-identified barriers that could be helpfully reduced on both sides, actually, in specific sectors. And this is a public study that's on our website on ustr.gov. We've also initiated a series of studies just about the role of small businesses in exporting and the export profile of the United States. And those studies are on our website as well at ustr.gov. But we anticipate that the TTIP will particularly yield more benefits for the small business because of the disproportionate costs of the trade barriers that fall upon them. Separate issue, the visa issue is a matter of discussion with our Congress, is the one that has the purview of entry into the United States. But that being said, if through the TTIP we anticipate all kinds of business facilitation measures that would be easier on both sides. For example, in services, we have a very comprehensive and ambitious offer in services, which is 80% of both of our GDPs, whether it's in accounting, finance, insurance, education, tourism, software, ITC, environmental services, architectural services, you name it. We have, proposed that EU service providers and investment would have the same treatment as the United States service providers. So these would be, creating huge opportunities in services for both U.S. and EU companies, whereby a lot of these are SME providers, particularly in IT, for example, or portfolio management, or architecture, environmental services. So we see a lot of opportunities for professionals to be able to take advantage of the TTIP.
Thank you, Christina. Now let's hear your voice.
Thanks. Just first to comment on the question of the study, and perhaps a bit to explain also how what is the EU normally doing concerning all the trade negotiations. At the outset of the negotiations, we always carry out an impact assessment. What will be the impacts on economic, social, environmental, and so on? And part of that is also the study really on the economic impacts. And this is also something which can be found on our website, and I think that Director General Caillé also quoted some of these the figures from this study. Then, in the course of the negotiations, we also carry out sustainability impact assessment, which looks even in more detail also on the social environmental side. And this is in the course of the negotiations. And then at the end of each negotiation, we also do what I call the analysis of the consequences, which will be then made already taking into account the provisions of the agreement which has been agreed. As certainly at the outset, you have the forecasts of the objectives, what the negotiators try to obtain, to achieve, but in the end you can actually see what has been obtained. But here I'd also like to promote to you, as we have SME representatives here in this event, an online questionnaire which is still ongoing and which is putting the questions about the different barriers that your companies face in the US market. And there were a couple of those which were mentioned. And these, namely, as we know, what are the tariffs, but if, as regards the behind-the-border barriers, we would be interested, what are the specific hindrances for the SMEs to access the US market?
Thank you. I know, Arnaldo, you would also like to comment.
Well, actually, it has just been remembered what I wanted to underline. What we need to improve in Europe is the capacity to address directly potential beneficiaries, that in this case should be the SMEs. Now, you have just remembered what I wanted to say, that there is an instrument, a specific tool which is available online to make our negotiators aware of what our problems are in the business community. But if I could just make a suggestion, that questionnaires refers specifically to barriers that you might have with your own company in dealing or trading with the US and so forth. I think that we should add also a chapter where I might not have any specific experience in finding barriers with the US, but I might fear that I might find a barrier. And that, I think, it is something that we could include in our narrative when we discuss and talk about the TTIP.
Thank you very much. Will there be any more questions? I know you might be hungry. Lunch is waiting. If not, then let me thank our guests for excellent presentations and a debate. I would like to conclude this session. I know that Mr. Polito will have further very important strategic messages to you concerning networking, lunch, drinks, and so on. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So thank you all the panelists. We'll break now for a lunch, for a networking lunch in the Expo Hall, which is provided by our hosts, the European Commission, the Italian Presidency. Don't forget that there are Meet the Expert sessions taking place in the Expo area starting from 1:30. And if you have to visit the Entrepreneur Expo, now it's time to do it. Please be back in your seats here in Galatea at 14:30, for our new session called The Pitch. I won't be there because I finished my task. Let me thank you for 2 very interesting days. Thank you. Bye.